Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this year's webinar organized by the Companies Registry for the TCSP sector. In the first part of my presentation, I would like to share with you the points to note for applicants or holders of trust or company service provider licenses. Then, I will share with you some of the major amendments of the revised guideline on anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism for trust or company service provider licensees, which has come into effect since March 2025. Lastly, I will share the common deficiencies identified in the policy statements and found during interviews and inspections with the licensees. Let's have a quick review on the TCSP licensing regime, which has commenced on the 1st of March 2018. Under the TCSP licensing regime, unless exempted, any person who carries on or wishes to carry on a trust or company service business in Hong Kong is required to apply for a license and satisfy a fit and proper test before they can provide trust or company services as a business in Hong Kong. Any person who carries on a trust or company service business in Hong Kong without a license commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a maximum penalty of a fine of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars and imprisonment for 6 months. Part 5A of the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorist Financing Ordinance, CAP 615, that is the AMLO, provides for the regulation of trust or company service providers, TCSPs. And the Companies Registry is responsible for the administration of the licensing regime for TCSPs. The Registrar has published 3 guidelines for the TCSP sector to let them have a clear understanding of the licensing regime for TCSPs. They are the Guideline on Licensing of Trust or Company Service Providers, that is the licensing guideline. The second one is the Guideline on Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Financing of Terrorism for Trust or Company Service Provider licensees, that is the MLCFT guideline. And this guideline was issued by the Registrar pursuant to Section 7 of the AMLO to provide guidance for TCSP licensees for compliance with the provisions of Schedule 2 to the AMLO. And it sets out the relevant customer due diligence and record-keeping requirements prescribed in the AMLO. And this AML safety guideline has been revised since March 2025, and I will share with you some of the major amendments later in my presentation. And the third guideline is the Guideline on Imposition of Pecuniary Penalty. Regarding the application for a TCSP license, the following persons will be subject to the fit and proper test. For an applicant that is an individual carrying on business as sole proprietor, will be the individual and each ultimate owner. For an applicant that is a partnership, it will be each partner and each ultimate owner. And for an applicant that is a corporation, will be each director, including the alternate director, and each ultimate owner. Pursuant to Section 53B of the AMLO, the following persons are exempted from the licensing requirement, including the fit and proper test. The first type is the accounting professional, that is a certified public accountant, CPA, as defined in the Professional Accountants Ordinance, or a CPA practicing, a corporate practice, or a CPA firm as defined in the Accounting and Financial Reporting Council Ordinance. The second type is legal professional, that is a solicitor or a foreign lawyer as defined in the Legal Practitioners Ordinance. The third type is authorized institution as defined in the Banking Ordinance. The fourth type is licensed corporation as defined in the Securities and Futures Ordinance that operates a trust or company service business in Hong Kong that is ancillary to the corporation's principal business. And the fifth type is person of a class or description prescribed by the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury by regulation. Now here comes to the licensing requirements. Now make sure that a person is required to apply for a TCSP license before carrying on a trust or company service business in Hong Kong by submitting Form TCSP1. If a TCSP licensee would like to continue to carry on trust or company service business in Hong Kong after the expiry of its license, then it is required to apply for the renewal of its license at least 60 days before the expiry of the license by submitting Form TCSP2. If a licensee would like to add an ultimate owner or a partner or a director, then it must obtain prior approval from the registrar before adding the ultimate owner, partner, or director by submitting Form TCSP3. And a TCSP licensee has to notify the registrar of a change in its particulars within 1 month beginning on the date on which the change takes place by submitting Form TCSP6. And if a licensee intends to cease its trust or company service business, then it needs to notify the registrar by submitting Form TCSP7 before the intended date of cessation. And we would like to remind you that actually all forms can be delivered to the TCSP registry by electronic means via our website at www.tcsp.cr.gov.hk. You are encouraged to register a user account for the online services under the licensing regime for trust or company service providers. Now, the following are some of the key points to note when applying for a TCSP license. The most important is remember not to commence any trust or company service business unless a license is granted. So when you submit the Form TCSP1, please ensure to submit a copy of valid business registration certificate. That is, the BR certificate number in the middle should be 000, but not the branch registration certificate. That is, the certificate number in the middle is 001 or 002, etc., as one of the supporting documents. And also, please provide the information of ultimate owner, but not the shareholder. You can refer to paragraph 4.3 of the licensing guideline for the definition of ultimate owner. And also, please ensure that you need to appoint at least one compliance officer, CO, and one money laundering reporting officer, MLRO, and keep the appointment records as well as the responsibilities of the CO and MLRO. Please also ensure that the CO and MLRO are normally based in Hong Kong. And lastly, remember to keep a copy of the completed application form for record and future reference. Regarding the renewal of TCSP license, now TCSP licensees must submit the applications for renewal at least 60 days before the expiry of their licenses. Now, please note that there is no grace period, and licensees have to apply for a new license if they miss the deadlines for renewal of the licenses. So please ensure to submit the renewal applications before the deadlines. Licensees are advised to apply for renewal of their licenses 3 to 4 months before their licenses are due to expire. The TCSP registry will issue reminder emails to licensees 4 months before the expiry of their licenses. So please check your email accounts, including those spam mail or junk mail boxes, in order not to miss the emails and the deadlines. Please note that it is the responsibility of the licensees to submit the renewal applications before the deadlines. Well, when you submit the Form TCSP2, please ensure the information you fill in, it should be consistent with the records previously provided to the registrar. So you may need to review the licensee's records first before submitting the renewal applications. And if changes in the particulars of the licensee or its relevant persons have been taken place, then please submit Forms TCSP6 to notify the registrar of the changes. The licensee should also ensure that prior approval for adding ultimate owner, partner, or director has been granted by the registrar. And upon making the application for renewal of license successfully, unless your application is withdrawn or the current license is revoked or suspended, your current license remains in force until it is renewed, or if it is not renewed, until the decision not to renew takes effect. A TCSP license is normally valid for 3 years. If a TCSP licensee wishes to continue to carry on its trust or company service business upon the expiry of its license, then it must submit an application for renewal of license at least 60 days before the license is due to expire. And if the licensee has successfully submitted the renewal application, even its current license has expired before the renewed license is granted, the current license still remains in force until a decision is made on its renewal application. If the licensee has failed to submit the application for renewal at least 60 days before the expiry of its license, then it must apply for a new TCSP license if it still wishes to carry on a trust or company service business in Hong Kong after the expiry of its current license. The TCSP registry will process the application for a new TCSP license, and a new license will be granted to the applicant if his application is successful. The new TCSP license will bear a new license number. If the existing license has expired before a new license is granted, then the applicant must cease carrying on its trust or company service business before the new license is granted. Otherwise, it will commit an offense of carrying on a trust or company service business in Hong Kong without a license, and it will be liable on conviction to a maximum penalty of a fine of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars and imprisonment for 6 months. Please note that all TCSP licensees have to comply with the licensing conditions imposed by the registrar pursuant to Section 53J of the MLO. That is, the licensee should appoint a CO and a MLRO during the term of the license and should ensure that a new CO or MLRO is appointed within 7 days where a vacancy occurs in the 2 posts. And the licensee should put in place adequate and proper anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorist policies, procedures, and controls, as evidenced by policy statements or other written documents. And the licensee should provide information relating to its business during the term of the license as may be required by the registrar, and such information should be provided within such time as the registrar may specify. The registrar may take disciplinary actions against a TCSP licensee if it fails to comply with any of the licensing conditions. As I've mentioned before, Licensing Condition 3 requires a TCSP licensee to provide information relating to its trust or company service business to the registrar during the term of its license. Form SIS-2 is one type of information that is required to be submitted to the registrar. Please be aware that Form SIS-2 will be sent to all licensees for completion through email as an annual exercise. Licensees who have failed to return the duly completed Forms SIS-2 before the deadline will constitute a breach of Licensing Condition 3, and disciplinary action may be taken against the licensee under Section 53Z of the MLO. If a TCSP licensee would like to add an ultimate owner, a partner, a director who is subject to the fit and proper test, then it must obtain the prior written approval from the registrar before adding that ultimate owner or partner or director by submitting Form TCSP3, Form TCSP4, and or Form TCSP5 with the supporting documents and correct fees to the TCSP registry electronically, in person, or by post. Now here is an example. If a licensee would like to add an individual director, then it should first submit a Form TCSB3 and also a Form TCSB4 to apply for the prior written approval from the registrar for the proposed person to become a director. And after prior approval is obtained, then the licensee can arrange for the approved person to become a director. And after the appointment is made, the licensee should submit a Form ND2A to the company's registry under the company's ordinance within 15 days after the appointment. And the licensee should also submit a Form TCSB6 to the registrar under the AMLO within 1 month after the appointment. If there are any changes in the particulars of the TCSB licensee, it should notify the registrar within 1 month, beginning on the date on which the change takes place, by submitting the Form TCSB6 together with the supporting documents to the TCSB registries electronically, in person, or by post. Now, below are the types of changes where a TCSB licensee must notify the registrar. The first type of change is the changes in particulars of licensee, such as licensee's business name, business address or business email address, business telephone number, etc. The second type of change is the addition or cessation of the licensee's ultimate owner, partner, director, CEO, or MLRO. And the third type of change is the changes in particulars of the licensee's ultimate owner, partner, director, CEO, or MLRO. And the next type of change is the changes in the fit and proper status of persons who have undergone the fit and proper test. And the last type is the licensee that has registered as a redomiciled company under Section 820C of the Companies Ordinance. And please also note that if a TCSB licensee who is a corporation is in liquidation or a receiver has been appointed, then the licensee should also notify the registrar by submitting the Form TCSB6. Now, we have noticed that quite a number of TCSB licensees have wrongly believed that when they have filed notifications to report changes as required under the Companies Ordinance, then they have already fulfilled the requirements under the AMLO as well. Now, we would like to take this opportunity to remind all licensees that they are required to comply with the filing requirements under both the Companies Ordinance and the AMLO, and they should file different notifications to the CR and the TCSB registry respectively. If a TCSB licensee fails to comply with the filing requirements under the AMLO, it will be liable to prosecution or may be subject to disciplinary actions by the registrar. If a TCSB licensee intends to cease its trust or company service business, it should notify the registrar before the intended date of cessation by submitting Form TCSB7 together with the supporting documents to the TCSB registry electronically, in person, or by post. Next, I would like to share with you some of the major amendments of the revised AML and CFT guideline, which has come into effect since March 2025. And the major amendments are as follows. Revising its format and contents to align with the guidelines published by other regulatory authorities in Hong Kong. Introducing the requirement and guidance for TCSB licensees to conduct money laundering and terrorist financing, that's ML and TF risk assessments, at an institutional level. Introducing simplified and enhanced AML and CFT policies, procedures, and controls, there's AML and CFT systems, and providing practical guidance to facilitate application of simplified due diligence, there's SDD, and enhanced due diligence, EDD, under a risk-based approach with examples of potentially lower or higher risk factors and possible SDD and EDD measures. You may refer to Chapter 4.8 of the AML-CFT guideline for the details on SDD. And my colleague, Senior Solicitor, Ms. Marie Leung, will share with you the details on EDD in her presentation later. Now, one of the major amendments of the revised AML-CFT guideline is the introduction of the requirement and guidance for TCSP licensees to conduct ML or TF risk assessment at an institutional level. Now, the licensee should conduct the institutional ML or TF risk level to identify, assess, and understand its ML or TF risk in relation to its customers, the countries or jurisdictions its customers are from or in, the countries, jurisdictions the TCSP licensee has operations in, and the products, services, transactions, and delivery channels of the TCSP licensee. And the appropriate step to conduct the institutional ML-TF risk assessment by the licensee should include the following. First one is documenting the risk assessment process, which includes the identification and assessment of relevant risks supported by qualitative and quantitative analysis and information obtained from relevant internal and external sources. Considering all the relevant risk factors before determining what the level of overall risk is and the appropriate level and type of mitigation to be applied. Obtaining the approval of senior management on the risk assessment results, having a process by which the risk assessment is kept up to date, and having appropriate mechanisms to provide the risk assessment to the registrar when required to do so. Another major amendment is the introduction of the simplified and enhanced AML-CFT systems. TCSP licensees should implement appropriate AML-CFT systems following the risk-based approach. It should have the AML-CFT systems approved by senior management to enable effective management and mitigation of risks that are relevant to the TCSP licensee. And it should have the implementation and AML-CFT systems monitored and enhanced if necessary. And it should also take enhanced measures to manage and mitigate the risks where high risks are identified. And it may have the nature, scale, and complexity of AML-CFT systems simplified, provided that the licensee complies with the statutory requirements set out in Schedule 2 of the AML and the requirements set out in paragraph 2.2, 2.3, and 3.2 of the AML-CFT guideline. The lower ML-TF risks which form the basis for doing so have been identified through an appropriate risk assessment. For example, using the institutional ML-TF risk assessment, and the simplified ML-CFT systems are approved by senior management and subject to review from time to time. And TCSP licensees should implement AML-CFT systems having regard to the nature, size, and complexity of its businesses and the ML-TF risk arising from those businesses, which should include the following: compliance management arrangements, an independent audit function, employee screening procedures, and an ongoing employee training program. Now, for the enforcement of the TCSP licensing regime, the TCSP registry has established an enforcement system to ensure that TCSP licensees comply with the licensing and AML-CFT requirements. And we would conduct site inspections against TCSP licensees, and they may be in the form of surprise inspections or inspections by appointment. And during the inspections, we will interview relevant persons and inspect records and documents. And meanwhile, we will also invite the relevant persons of the licensees to attend interviews. And we will also examine the various documents submitted by TCSP licensees, including the forms SIS2, which are related to AML safety policies, procedures, and measures taken by the licensees. And at the same time, we will also consider the intelligence provided by other law enforcement agencies and conduct investigation when necessary to ensure that the licensees have fully complied with the licensing and AML safety requirements. Depending on the nature and seriousness of the contraventions or the non-compliance, the following actions may be taken against the licensee by the registrar. For minor contraventions, advisory or warning letter may be issued to the licensee. And for more serious contraventions and breaches, the registrar may consider to take disciplinary actions against the licensee, which include public reprimand the licensee, order the licensee to take remedial action to rectify the non-compliance, or even impose a pecuniary penalty of not exceeding 500,000 Hong Kong dollars against the licensee. If the registrar considers the relevant persons of the licensee are no longer fit and proper to carry on or associate with trust or company service business, she may consider to suspend or even revoke the license or not to renew the license. And if any person has committed an offense under the AML, prosecution action may be taken against the person as well. You may refer to the enforcement section on the TCSP website for the details on the highlights of prosecution and disciplinary cases. Now, I would like to share with you some of the common deficiencies identified in the policy statements and found during interviews and inspections with the licensees. Firstly, regarding the policy statement, it is noted that some of the licensees still have not established their own written policy statements, or some licensees just copy the policy statements of other regulatory bodies without preparing their own policy statements. And it is also noted that the following areas or details are sometimes found omitted in the written policy statements of the TCSP licensees, and they include institutional MLTF risk assessment, procedures and/or documents required for customer due diligence on persons purporting to act on behalf of the customers, additional measures for customers not physically present for identification purposes, screening of customers against the list of sanctioned destinations and terrorists, screening of beneficial owners of customers on politically exposed persons, and employee screening procedures. And we also find that the following deficiencies can be found during the inspections on the documents and records provided by the TCSP licensees during the inspections. Now, for risk assessment, it's noted that some of the licensees are unable to demonstrate that they have conducted institutional risk assessment, or they are unable to demonstrate that they have conducted risk assessment on their customers, and no risk assessment records or results are kept. And for customer screening, no screening is conducted on customers against the updated list of sanctioned destinations and terrorists, or the screening is not conducted as soon as practicable after the relevant lists are updated, or there is no screening on beneficial owners of customers on PEPs, or no screening records or results are kept. And for customer not physically present for identification, and there is no other additional measures or EDD have been conducted by the licensees against the customers, except online interviews with snapshot of their pictures holding the identification documents. Now, please also note that if a licensee considers to mitigate the MLTF risk by obtaining copies of documents that have been certified by a suitable certifier, then it should note the types of suitable persons for certifying verification of identity documents and the details on the certification of the documents. You may refer to the appendix of the revised AML-CFT guideline for more details on the use of an independent and appropriate person to certify identification documents. Next, for the ongoing monitoring, some of the licensees are not aware of the changes in the particulars of the customers and their beneficial owners, or the licensees are unable to demonstrate that the information of their customers is up-to-date and relevant. And for a person proposed to act on behalf of the customer, some of the licensees have not verified the authority of the persons purported to act on behalf of the customers who are corporations, and the licensees have not obtained the authorization documents from the corporate customers. We hope that the licensees can be aware of the deficiencies mentioned above and avoid making the same mistakes in the future. Now, here are the highlights on key updates in 2025. As I mentioned before, the revised AML-CFT guideline for TCSPs has already come into effect in March 2025. And in May, the new company redomiciliation regime to facilitate non-Hong Kong corporations to redomicile to Hong Kong came into effect. And we have revised the forms TCSP1, TCSP2, TCSP3, TCSP5, and TCSP6. And all TCSP licensees should have complete and returned the Form SIS2 for 2024 to the TCSP registry by email or by post by the 25th July 2025. You may visit our website for more information and updates on the TCSP licensing regime. Now, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.